Okay, what is up, everyone? It's Thomas with Real Broker here in St. Augustine, Florida, coming at you live every Wednesday at 8 p.m., going over the market stats, the news you know about, think about buying, selling, or investing here in Northeastern Florida. And we're also doing a Q&A. So if you have any questions about anything that we cover here, whether it's a news story or the market stats, or just something that you have a question about, leave it in the comments below. If you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave me a comment. I'll come back and try to answer it as soon as I can. But I've got an interesting start off for you. We're going to start with the market stats as we always do, and then head into the news stories. But I've this stat is really interesting to me, and I want to know what you guys think about it. So I really like your comments on this below. But it's the days on market, and this is only in St. Johns County. So I've unselected everything between single-family homes, condominiums, and townhomes. This is the days on market for closed homes. Now, we've talked about, active listings and inventory growing significantly year over year, month over month, many, many times. But one of the things that is a good indicator of our market is the days on market, right? But I do feel like this is slightly misleading because it says 46 days on market. Now, this is only for the homes that closed. So when we're talking about 46 days on market just for the closed homes, that's really representing like a fraction of the homes that are available on the market, right? Because there's things that go into pending and then don't go into contract, and then they're not including like the stuff that never goes into contract. So in reality, that days on market is much, much higher for the average person, right? But 46 days for most of the things that are going to the closing table. So that's on the market, and then it has the time from when it goes under contract to the closing table. That is completely separate. So add another 30 days to that in total. So it's roughly taking you, 2.5 months to be able to close on a home. But this is not representative of every home on the market, in my opinion. It's only the things that, for the most part, close pretty quickly. So you have two tails. You have stuff that's closing under 30 days, and then you pretty much have the rest of the market, right? So what we're seeing now in terms of the active inventory that's coming new to the market, that's starting to slow slightly. And the homes that are selling the fastest are the homes that are actually newer to the market, not the ones that have been sitting on the market. For whatever reason, they've become stale. The market's rejected their price. It is what it is, right? So very interesting statistic here in terms of what's happening, because when you look at, let me just share this other statistic so it can kind of round out my point here. But if we look at, where's active? If we look at new listings, we see that that's gone up, right? Well, down for the month, but it's gone up significantly. If we look at total active inventory for the entire Northeastern Florida area, we just beat out 11,000 listings, which is for our area. Or here we go, active inventory, my mistake. This is just for St. Johns County. So now this area right here, we know this is pandemic. Like this is what it is. There's a huge pendulum swing down, and now it seems like we're on a pendulum swing up. But is this starting to round off, right? We're seeing up 12.4% from this time last year. So not a huge increase in terms of what we saw previously, which, if you're looking from the previous year since 2022, we're looking at 40% increases year over year. But that's because we had 1,000 homes here, right? Then you look at 2022 in September, 2,000 homes. Let me go to September here, 2,300. Let me go to September next year, let's see, 2,900. So it's climbed significantly, but I do feel that it's going to start to round out here as the market starts to stabilize. And then also now we talked about the Fed last week in terms of what they're going to do in terms of lowering rates. Everyone thought that they should have lowered rates a couple times this year already. Hasn't happened yet. So they're expecting for the last part of this year to see 2 rate cuts by the end of this year, which then could translate to mortgage rates going down, right? So my personal opinion is that once mortgage rates get in like the low 6s, high 5s, it's going to start. People are just going to start coming back to the market because it's just more affordable. Really, I think that's the biggest holdup that we have here today. Because when it was like a 5% mortgage rate, you can see it in the stats. And if I pull up, let me just pull up median sale price here. And then we can also pull up mortgage rates. No one was really batting an eye when mortgage rates were 5%, right? You can see that things were still moving. But then once mortgage rates started to go up to 6-7%, you can see that things flatlined. So I think Once that happens, we'll have more inventory in the market, which is good for buyers. We're technically still in a balanced market, which means, oh, I didn't show you this. Sorry. I thought this was on the screen. I hope it was. I got to figure this out better. Technically, we're in a balanced market just based on the months of supply of inventory that we have. But we're trending towards a buyer's market. So in a way, the sellers are giving more than they typically would just because of the fear of like, will I be able to sell my home? So one good thing I was talking about is we have a lot of people that are relocating to our area. In 2020, 2021, 2022, many of the people relocating, and just because of the mortgage rate and mortgage interest rate, every market throughout the entire country was a seller's market. Now, a lot of the people that I work with, it seems that a lot of people from the Northeast want to reach out to me. So New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, talking to a guy from Boston this past week, Virginia, but then also, I guess from the north, really colder areas coming down here, sometimes from California as well. They're coming down here and they're leaving a seller's market to come and compete down here in a seller's market over the past couple of years. 2020, 2021, 2022, we were in a seller's market. So the sellers had all the leverage in the negotiations. Now you can pretty much go from the Northeast, which is still in a crazy seller's market. I was talking to someone from Rochester a couple weeks ago, and they're at like 17 days on market, which is intense. Now they can go from the seller's market and come down here to a buyer's market. So they sell, they're up in a seller's market, they have the most leverage up there. Then they come down here as a buyer and they have more leverage down here. So in reality, it's a better time, to buy. So maybe I'm just a realtor finagling ways and finagling stats. Who knows? What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments below. Let me make sure I don't have any comments here. We got Kevin Hawthorne here. Good evening from Lakeland, Florida. Good evening, Kevin. Thank you for tuning in. Are you thinking about moving to our area? Leaving Lakeland? Thanks for leaving a comment. Appreciate you. Let's go ahead and go on to the news stories here, guys. I got, I think, 4 or 5 news stories for you. So let's go ahead and check them out. And we always start from a national news story to a state news story to a local news story. Okay. All right. This worked just fine before, unfortunately. Okay, well, so it's no secret that potential Mamdani mayorship strikes fear in the real estate industry in New York. So you've seen, I'm not sure of his first name, but Mamdani won the Democratic nomination to run for mayor in New York City. He ran on a very, very liberal base. He's got a lot of liberal policies, and that then sparked fear in the luxury market, right? For the real, because they're going to have to pay more taxes, the luxury market essentially in New York. So then you have industry leader in the real estate space all across the country, but particularly in New York, Ryan Serhant. He comes out and he says, I'm getting phone calls all day long of luxury people saying, hey, I don't want to buy anymore, pull the contract, I'm moving, right? And then that sparks, of course, in our area, we're in Florida, Ron DeSantis has to say something about it. He's like, hey, we're all cool with whatever they do up there in New York City because it's going to be a net benefit for Florida, right? So I just wanted to talk about that. And do I think this will bring some benefit to Florida? Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's going to bring more extremely wealthy people here, but there's also extremely wealthy people who are just going to move to like Connecticut and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and still operate in New York City. They're just going to move their assets out of there. So it's really interesting because the real estate market and the industry leaders talk about this as like it's the fall of New York and the rise of Florida. Like, I mean, maybe, right? There's so many factors that go into that, and there's so many options for people that are super wealthy. So will that lead to people moving to Florida? 100%, because there's plenty of people that live in the 5 boroughs that aren't okay with what he's talking about in a lot of his policies, right? So they're going to be like, you know what, I'm getting out of Dodge. But then there's people, I'm from New York, but there's plenty of New Yorkers there. They're like, hey, I'm staying no matter what. Like, this is my home. So that's not going to change, right? And there's going to be billionaires that are going to pay the tax. There's billionaires that are going to just move outside to Jersey or New York. I'd see it probably being a net positive for Florida, but like they talk about it like all of Florida is going to change tomorrow if he wins. And it's very potential, is you have a Democrat or a Republican, which is more likely to win in New York. And I don't care either way, but probably a Democrat, right? So we shall see what happens, guys. Of course, I'll stay on top of it. If you guys have any insight into that, if you live in New York City or if you've seen something like this happen in your area, let me know in the comments below. Really like some other people's opinions on that. But we're going to head into another news story here, which you need to be familiar with, which is the Zillow ban. Why anyone selling a home should be following the Zillow ban lawsuit closely. So essentially there are two lawsuits going on. One is another listing site that is exclusively for pocket listings, and oh my gosh, all these things are behind paywalls. I literally just read these a second ago. But all right, well, I can just talk about it. The other one is Compass, and Compass says like, hey, we have our own listings that we don't put on the active market for our clientele as a service to them. And essentially what that says is like, hey, we have a book in our office that you can go through our listings. It's not available on Zillow. Zillow's come out and said, hey, if you do that, we're banning that property from our MLS entirely, right? So, or from Zillow's platform entirely, not the MLS. So they're saying we're not going to feature it at all on our platform, and Zillow controls about 80% of the real estate traffic. Most people go to Zillow, then there's Redfin and Realtor. Most people use Zillow. So Compass sues them because they're like, hey, like, you don't have the right to do this. Like, it's ultimately up to the seller and what they want to do. And the real estate industry, you know, myself included, I always think what is best for the consumer is having a pocket listing, which is a home that is off the MLS. It's not on the MLS. It's not available for me to see. It's also not on Zillow. It's more or less like you have to know that agent and know that they have something available. Or you have to have this book that Compass has, right? Which, that's old school real estate, right? That's how real estate was sold before Zillow, right? So you have a book in your office and you flip through it. So they're touting this as a service for their sellers. In reality, I don't think it's the best for most sellers. It's probably only good for extremely high-end luxury sellers that have some type of identity that they want to protect, also their home that they want to protect and not put it out there on the open market, all the pictures, floor plans, all that kind of stuff. Or maybe you want to keep their financial situation a little bit more private. Maybe they're in a bad financial situation. They want to do it off market so that it's really quiet, hush, hush, no one sees it active. In general, I think it's a negative for most sellers, right? Most people don't have like that type of issue or that worry. I think it's a negative for most sellers. But at the end of the day, the seller should have to be the person that guides that, right? Because they are the consumer. But that's a very, very niche consumer, which Compass does typically do more luxury transactions than the rest of the industry, or at least that's how you associate their name and their brand, right? Which is a great thing for Compass. So is that for their target market, is that what's best for their target market? You could say so. So then they become the exclusive, like, hey, you want to list your property and like kind of do everything off market with all the luxury buyers that we have, because we do control a lot of that, then you're going to want to list with us, right? So what's the right thing? I think what the right thing is whatever the consumer wants. I don't think we should make these rules, but I also think like there should be outlines of like, hey, if you sell your home off market, more than likely you're going to sell it for less just because of your pool of buyers, right? That should be noted for people. So maybe they do that, maybe they don't. I have no idea. We shall see what happens in the future if that continues to be a thing. I'm not sure if you've seen that that meme going around that says, 100 men versus a gorilla, who wins? Zillow is the gorilla, right? In our world, and most people don't realize this, but Zillow is actually, in a way, I also view Zillow as a negative, because what it does is it sells leads back to agents. So I'll just show you this real quick. Most people don't realize this, especially if they're not in the industry. But if you go to Zillow.com, sorry, I was looking at rentals the other day. You go to Zillow.com, and let me just reset all this stuff here. And we'll just click on any old listing here. Let's see. Let's just do one that's an address. So 40 Martha Court. Okay. You see here the two things that draw your attention outside of like price, beds, and bath. Request a tour, contact agent. So when you contact the agent, you think like, or request a tour, you think you're contacting the agent, you think you're contacting the listing agent directly. That would be Heidi M. Lang, who's listing this at Keller Williams Realty Atlantic Partners. That is not typically how it works, right? Because what happens is like I could buy the 32092 zip code from Zillow, and then Zillow is able to give me leads from their platform, right? So then let's say I spend 10 grand a month on it and I get 30 leads. That's what the trade is, right? So someone clicks that button, they say, hey, I want to take a look at this house. My phone rings and I say, okay, I'll show you this house. Oh, can you tell me about the roof? Yeah, let me look it up real quick. Like, you're not the agent that is listing the house, so I don't know everything about it right off the rip. So you think you're getting the listing agent, but in reality, you're getting someone who pays for the platform. So not necessarily a service, right, for buyers, in my opinion, right? That's not exactly what you want. And as a seller, you want someone to like, hey, if I'm contacting the agent, I want someone that picks up the phone and knows what they're talking about, right? With the Zillow platform, that is not that. So I don't know. Did you guys know that? Was that a lesson at all? Was that a secret? I feel like it is amongst the consumers of the industry. They think they're always contacting the listing agent. You never are. You're contacting the agent that pays for that zip code and gets leads from Zillow. It's a whole business model. So, in a way, Zillow sells the leads for the listings that we go out and talk to the sellers and get in person with back to other people. So if I put a listing up on the market, the leads that technically should be going to me because it's my listing go to other people that pay for the Zillow platform. So it's free to play, but the game, I guess, has in-game purchases. I guess that's a good way to put it. All right. Either way, let's go on to the next news story, guys. I'll stop boring you with my rhetoric, okay? All right. So I guess that pulled up. So this is something that we talked about. It kind of ties into what we talked about last week. Oh my God, these ads are terrible. Okay. Historic Magic Beach Motel's fate uncertain as redevelopment proposal hits another snag. So if you're not familiar, the Magic Beach Hotel on Volano Beach is kind of a staple in our area. It's I think it's registered as a historic building with St. Johns County, not with St. Augustine, but with St. Johns County. And the owner of it wants to get it redeveloped. He wants to partner with someone or sell it and redevelop it into townhomes. The local area is not happy with it. They've brought proposals up twice. It's got denied twice. And the reason that they pulled it up said like, hey, like it's not functional in today's world. Like they just built, I think, the Hilton Hotel right across the street there. Is it the Hyatt Hotel? They built a really nice hotel right across the street from this. They actually have a couple of them down there. And they're like, it's economically not even feasible because we're competing with them and we're this old motel, which has a lot of charm. Like when you look at it, it has that old school style, like almost like Miami, Miami in the 80s almost, right? The neon lights and everything. It's the old school motel, the Florida motel. But they've got denied because it's a historic building, or it got registered as a historic building or like a landmark within Volano Beach. And this is in the midst of St. Augustine also saying like, hey, we're going to try and claim these two properties by eminent domain because of flood. And this is in downtown St. Augustine. So because of flooding, they want to build a flood wall and they're going to enact eminent domain to buy property to be able to do that. So this is just another thing where it's like, all right, well, this is this guy's property. He didn't know it was turned into a historic place, or at least that's what I can read here, what I can tell. He wants to sell it, but like, you're kind of limiting on what he can do just because you're like, hey, no, he has to keep this facade of the building, right? So someone's got to go in there and renovate it. But in reality, like economically in today's world, does that pencil out when you're talking about the cost of renovations and all things you need to do and how much money you're going to get for a motel room on Volano Beach? That's more or less going towards like that area now. And this is just the reality of it. It's not me, saying it should be one way or the other. That area now is more geared towards like a luxury client, right? Does that luxury client want to stay in the motel? And one of the things the city of St. Augustine says, or the commissioners or the St. John's Planning Board, one of them, the government, says, is like, well, there's plenty of motels that operate and make money here in St. Augustine. Well, one, they don't, like, to say that off the rip, like, you don't know what their income and expenses look like. Like, you don't know that. You see that they're operating. You don't know if they're doing well or like what you may consider well may not be well to them, but there are success, from what I've seen, there is a successful motel, a couple of them in St. Augustine, but it's also just in different areas, right? So this all, to round this out, is this okay? This is someone's property that they own that they want to sell, and now the government's stepping in the way. And this is in the midst of the eminent domain thing as well, saying like, hey, we're going to buy your two properties because we want to build a wall, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So what's the right thing to do there? In terms of the eminent domain, I understand they have a huge flooding problem in downtown St. Augustine. In terms of the greater good of the community, having a seawall might help, right? In terms of this, I don't necessarily agree. Like, I do think, like, hey, maybe they move forward with the plan that they have, but they need to make it as retro and they need to make it fit the bill. It needs to look very similar to how it is today, right? Then maybe they can move forward. There has to be some type of compromise, opposed to saying, like, no, we're going to limit what you can do with this building. So that's going to then limit you as a seller how much you can get for your building. That I don't think is necessarily fair. So I don't know. Maybe I'm in the pockets of the developers. That's what St. Johns County resident will say that to me one day. I'm sure they already have. I don't know. But I'm not. I live in a 1,100 square foot home. Costs about $300,000. So on to the next news story here, guys. This one's interesting. Pickle Mafia comments spark debate over proposed St. Johns County indoor facility. So, tensions rose at a St. Johns County Planning and Zoning meeting this week as opponents raised concerns about what one speaker dubbed the Pickle Mafia during discussions about a proposed indoor facility along US 1. So, they're looking to build, let's see here, in Rolling Hills Industrial Park. Everyone supports bringing the rapidly growing sport to the area. It's the fastest growing sport for 4 years in a row. Pickleball is a lot of fun. I'm not sure if you guys have played it. I enjoy it. But this area here is essentially saying, like, because of traffic, it's going to cause safety hazards for local residents. Also, they're going to be worried about people parking in places that aren't designated for the pickleball spots. So the proposal calls for 4 courts between 2 buildings. This will be a private membership. It won't be public. 1 existing building and a new 7,000 square foot warehouse. Operating hours 9 to 9. 30 parking spots and private membership. So they're going to put proper signage on it. Overall, it got approved, but one of the locals were like, hey, listen, like, you don't mess with the... One opponent took the criticism a step further, saying, with the Pickle Mafia, where it's at, it becomes their ground, and they start taking it up and taking it over. It does, and it will. The Pickleball Mafia is one serious group, guys. Don't want to mess with them. You don't. You heard it. So I thought that was funny. Either way, going to the next news story here, guys. I think we got one more, and that's it. And this one, we're going to end it off on a high note here. But tell me something I don't know. St. Augustine Amphitheatre ranks 2nd in the United States, 3rd in the entire world. And if you've been to a show at the amphitheater, if you've gone to the farmers markets, I think they're actually having like a record market this weekend where they do like old school records, Tone Vendor, I think, is leading the charge, which is a record store. If you've been there, you know it's awesome. The amphitheater there is a gem of living here in St. Augustine, in my opinion. They bring in some really good acts. The whole setup is great. I mean, you pretty much, there's not a bad seat in the house with how angled everything is. Stays even going during the summer, it stays relatively cool. You get a nice ocean breeze most of the time. It's just a great venue, guys. I love the amphitheater. A lot of good shows out there. It's about as easy as it gets when going to a music venue. They now even have a shuttle that runs behind RB Hunt that drops you off right in front. So I've normally parked behind RB Hunt, take the shuttle up, and then I walk back if I don't want to, deal with any of the people on the shuttle. Because it's a show, people get rowdy. But that's going to be it, guys. That's all our news stories for this week. Here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. going over the market stats, the news you know about, everything about buying, selling, or investing here in Northeastern Florida. And we're also doing a Q&A. So, Kevin, thank you for joining here tonight. We've got 3 other people on here. Well, 3 people in total. So I appreciate you guys. Here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Until next time, have a good one.